Now time for some business news, and for that Stephen Carroll joins me on set. Hi Stephen.
Hi Olivia.
Now you're starting with a new snapshot of the global economy, and with a pleasant surprise, perhaps some good news?
Perhaps, but you do have to look for it. This is the latest forecast from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. The OECD says the global economy will shrink by 4.5% this year. That's still the worst slump in decades, but it's slightly less of a contraction than the organisation predicted back in June. The picture is improved for the United States, the Eurozone and France, among others, but still eye-watering drops in GDP, as you can see from those figures there. France expected to shrink by 9.5%. So it's simply less bad as opposed to actually good. The picture for emerging economies like India has actually worsened. The OECD now expecting the Indian economy to shrink by 10% this year. Overall, the organisation says that government support and stimulus programmes have helped to stave off the worst of this economic crisis, but it says that help will need to continue for some time to come.
Well, let's hang on to that hope of less bad, a chink of light there. Next, to the latest on the bid to save TikTok from being banned in the United States.
More details emerging of the planned deal with software giant Oracle. According to various reports, the plan would put TikTok's global business into a new standalone company, where its current Chinese owners ByteDance would be a majority shareholder and Oracle a minority one. That means that the American company would end up with a stake in the whole of the video app and not just its US operations. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says ByteDance is committed to making TikTok Global a US headquartered company, this in an effort to put distance between the app and its Chinese owners. President Trump had set a deadline of this Sunday for the sale of TikTok's US operations, or risk having the app banned. Staying with technology news, Facebook could be facing new scrutiny in the United States. The Wall Street Journal reporting that the Federal Trade Commission could bring an antitrust case against the social network by the end of the year. The report says a final decision on legal action hasn't yet been made, but the FTC, which is the competition regulator in the US, has spent more than a year investigating whether Facebook used its dominant position in social media to stifle competition. Facebook is still making its case to the Commission. A previous FTC ruling on privacy practices of the social network saw it pay a record $5 billion in fines.
Well, that is a lot of pandemic gloom there. But in the midst of all that, there is another chink of light, perhaps some good news for some companies.
Among them is the owner of the fashion retailer Zara. The Spanish group Inditex says that it has reached a turning point over the summer after seeing a massive slump in sales earlier in the year. From the 1st of August to the 6th of September, sales were just under 90% of what they were in the same period last year for the fashion retailer. That's helped to bring the company back into profitability in the 3 months to the end of July. Inditex shares up 6% after that news on the improved picture for the company. A mixed picture on the European markets this lunchtime. Not much movement at all across London, Paris and Frankfurt bourses. Investors looking ahead to the meeting of the Federal Reserve, which wraps up later on. We're not expecting a change in interest rates, but it's a chance to hear how America's central bank is viewing the state of the world's #1 economy.
Now, earlier you were telling us about a snapshot of the economy right now, which wasn't all rosy. You've got another snapshot of how things were before the pandemic struck in a new report from the US Census Bureau.
So the percentage of Americans living in poverty hit a record low in 2019, according to these figures which have just been published. 10.5% of people in the US were living below the poverty line last year. That's as household incomes increased to their highest level on record, and unemployment was at its lowest level in 50 years. Now, of course, all of that has changed since this survey was done. Joblessness has skyrocketed since March. Around 10 million fewer people were employed in the US in August compared to February of this year.
Now, coming back here to France, we were all encouraged to travel domestically for our holidays this summer. But even so, not many of us were taking planes, apparently. The picture's not looking so bright for the country's regional airports.
Or for most of the travel industry, that benefit only really of domestic travel only really hitting some parts of the country. The smaller airports in France facing extra challenges, not just that massive drop in visitor numbers, and particularly international visitors, but also competition from high-speed rail, which the government wants to replace many internal flights. Catherine Viat reports.
Hours of waiting for these taxi drivers, but no customers in sight. Even with the lifting of lockdown measures, the terminals at Bordeaux Airport remain empty, and the number of passengers has plummeted. 79% less in July compared to a year ago. This lack of travelers has a knock-on effect. Many of the airport shops and cafes have either closed or been forced to reduce their hours. The pandemic has also thrown a wrench into the airport's development plans. 169 million euros had been earmarked to expand the terminals and improve infrastructure. Now the project has been put on hold.
J'estime qu'on va conserver à peu près 30 millions d'euros de travaux qui sont lancés ou qui de toute façon vont être lancés. Mais malheureusement, le reste est reporté à une date qu'on ne connaît pas aujourd'hui. Ça sera en fonction de l'évolution de cette crise sanitaire.
The final blow for some, the end of the Air France shuttle flight to Orly, canceled in favor of encouraging train travel. Nearly 570,000 passengers flew it last year. For customers and employees at this aircraft maintenance company, no shuttle service means the end of rapid deliveries for needed parts.
La pièce prend le camion et on l'a le lendemain, donc on perd au moins 24 heures sur l'acheminement des pièces. Et pour un avion, laisser l'avion 24 heures de plus arrêté pour les opérations de compagnie aérienne, ça peut être un vrai problème.
Bordeaux Airport facing an uncertain future as other airlines contemplate service cuts too.
Now, very sadly, for those of us who love culture and live music, concerts are off the agenda for the moment because of the pandemic. But one music streaming service is investing in virtual gigs.
Yeah, you don't sound convinced.
No, I'm not.
Spotify has signed a deal with the ticketing site Songkick to promote live streamed performances. So Spotify will promote those gigs via artist pages on its service. Now, unlike Spotify's rival Amazon, it won't be streaming the show under the Spotify label. With most tours postponed until well into 2020, the music industry has been looking for a replacement for its traditional cash cow. Streaming shows have soared in popularity this year, particularly in recent months. The K-pop group BTS making almost $20 million from one streamed gig last June. The problem then becomes, like, how do you recreate the atmosphere of live music in your living room?
Indeed. Let's just leave it as a viable plan B, I think. Thank you very much for that business update, Stephen. Now, coming